For many visitors to the exhibition, the highlight may be the room, the 8th gallery, which is devoted to tapestries made at the Gobelins in Paris for Louis XIV. One of the first things that was done for the young king when he took personal control of France in the early 1660s was the amalgamation of existing workshops at a site known as the Gobelins, and thenceforth their exclusive charge was to produce magnificent tapestries celebrating Louis by allegory, by comparison, and by overt representation. This panel, which is one of the largest in the exhibition, it's about 5 yards high and about 10 yards wide, comes from a set of the story of Alexander, which was made in the 1670s. And this depicts the Battle of the Granicus, when Alexander's troops defeated a much larger Persian army. You've got to remember that Louis, in his mid-20s at this time, saw himself as a new Alexander. And it was this ambition that was to, in a way, to tip Europe into 40 years of almost continuous war. The tapestry is a magnificent tour de force of design, figurative design by Charles Le Brun, who is the genius behind much of the early Gobelin production. Like Raphael, a century and 130 years before, not only was he a magnificent designer of complex figurative schemes, but he was very gifted at identifying skilled assistants who could help him elaborate them into full-scale form. And we have various drawings by him and by Van der Merlen, who was one of his key assistants, just suggesting the planning and the effort that went into the design of these enormous woven frescoes. This is a scene from a set depicting key events in the life of Louis XIV. It's the first very high-quality weaving of this design, and although it's damaged and faded, it provides one of the most vivid glimpses we have today of the splendor of Louis's court, with its elaborate bed furnishings, silk wall hangings, paintings, rugs, costumes with their yards and yards of lace, and the silver furniture that was eventually melted down when Louis ran out of money. In the penultimate gallery of the exhibition, we look at tapestry production in late 17th century France, when a more decorative spirit comes into the designs. We have tapestries made at Beauvais, a workshop that had been set up at the same time as the Gobelins, but with the task of making tapestries for sale to the French nobility. And again, lacking royal financing, dependent on a commercial market, typically Beauvais tapestries are smaller and more decorative. And during the 1690s, we see just wonderful designs being introduced by artists like Jean Baran and Manoyer, which really kind of reflect a kind of this more decorative spirit, a lighter style, and are almost kind of, the foundations of, later Rococo design. Of the 44 tapestries in the exhibition, only 2 come from our own collection, and this Brun grotesque is one of them. It's a reflection of the fact that I wanted in the show really to show tapestries in their full glory. And regrettably, so many of the pieces in American museums today are damaged and faded, and I really wanted to try and find pieces in good color and condition. In the last gallery of the exhibition, we come back to Brussels, with the French court continuing to place such a high prestige on tapestry and on tapestry production. The other European courts of the day also continue to use tapestry, and they, by and large, source their great tapestries from Brussels. And as a result, Brussels goes through almost like a second Renaissance between 1680 and 1730, producing enormous tapestries for sale to patrons all over Europe. And we've got a few key examples, such as one of the so-called victories of the Duke of Marlborough, which were made in the mid-1710s to hang in the state apartments at Blenheim Palace, which was then being built for the Duke of Marlborough as a gift by the English nation for the success that he had led the Allied armies to against France in the wars of the Spanish Succession. And the Duke of Marlborough, the current Duke, has lent us this piece, the Battle of Bouchain, which actually normally hangs around a corner. So we can see it in its full splendor here in the Tisch galleries. It's, again, one of the largest pieces in the show. And here we see Marlborough receiving news of the victory of his troops at the Battle of Bouchain, which we see burning below. The artist uses this device of almost an Alp-like prominence so that he can show the whole battlefield laid out from a bird's-eye view. And it typifies, in a way, kind of the nature of great tapestry design. It reads very clearly from a distance, but when you go in close, you'll find that the landscape is exquisitely detailed. You can make out all the English encampment, all of the French encampment, the cattle trail along which the English managed to break into the town. It's all exquisitely detailed. This is an engraving about 12 inches wide, which we've blown up as the graphic in the entrance gallery to the show. And it's a reminder of the enormous effort that was involved in installing tapestries and taking them down. The great tapestries of the day were only hung for special occasions. And I think we have to remember the air of theatre and spectacle that their installation and removal must have lent to the grand events at the great courts of Europe. All the great courts had departments known as wardrobes, whose sole task it was to prepare these precious textiles and look after them. But of course, today, very few institutions have such staff. And in fact, I think the Metropolitan is one of the very few museums in the world that has the space and the resources to put on an exhibition like this, which involves the transportation of enormous objects, some too large to go through the internal corridors of the museum. And I feel it was wonderful. It took 5 weeks to install this show, and it was just wonderful working with many people who had also worked on the 2002 show, from the workshops, from the riggers, from the Textile Conservation Department, who worked as a really seamless team to prepare the objects, get them in place. As you walk through the galleries today, the tapestries hang as if so effortlessly, but spare a thought for our colleagues who worked so hard to bring this gorgeous exhibition to us. My goal is to send people away with a new sense of the significance and the beauty of tapestries. We won't see many exhibitions like this because of the logistical challenges, but I hope that those of you who've seen it and enjoyed it will help spread the word and get people into the show before January the 6th, when we go through the whole process again. Thank you.